And it is time for episode 2 of the Doomsday podcast from Spoke Media. It is Matt Mosley along with Ed Werder.
Who thought we would make it this long?
That's right. Well, and those are interesting words, Ed, as we bring that up.
So is the appropriately titled Doomsday podcast.
It's certainly, and just to reset the scene, we were dropping this Wednesday when the first episode of the Doomsday podcast dropped, and there was a lot of excitement around that, not only from you guys, and we've really enjoyed the feedback and appreciate that, and continue to find us on all sorts of platforms, Apple Podcasts and Stitcher, all the various platforms, and leave a review if you would. But that morning, that Wednesday morning, now I'm not typically someone who wakes up early, but in my excitement, I was up at about 6:15, 6:30. I stay up very, very late. But I was ready to roll. And Ed, even there you were in New Orleans and getting ready to cover the draft, as you always do. I got a text from you at about 7:45, 8 in the morning. Ed, if you would, a lot of folks, of course, anxious to hear from you because it was just, and I've had this question asked to me already. Now, did you guys know this was coming? And no, I
did not know when I agreed to do the Doomsday podcast with you that I would be able to devote myself to it full time. I had no idea. So the last time, I think I mentioned this when we did our first show, the last time I was in New Orleans to cover the draft, it happened to be when Mike Ditka traded all of his picks for Ricky Williams. And so I spent 3 days there and covered one pick. Well, this time, to do it even bigger and better, I went there and I covered no picks. We knew ESPN was going to have significant layoffs of so-called talent, which it's odd, Mose. I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but when we're working in newspapers, nobody referred to us as talent. Right?
No.
And in television, that is what they call you.
Yes.
That's not always how they treat you, but that is what they call you. So we knew talent. There were going to be a significant talent cut at ESPN. I had not expected that my name might be included, although I had not eliminated the possibility. And here's why I was concerned. Our good friend Mort, who was a guest last week, after the season, had told me that his understanding was these cuts were going to be made and the quality of work was not going to be a consideration. So it seemed to me that quality of work should be the only consideration. If it's not any part of the equation, then I kind of find myself a little vulnerable under that criteria. So anyway, I got a text message to call my boss, who's in charge of the NFL project at ESPN. And so I did that, and I did that knowing under the circumstances that unbelievably this meant I was going to get laid off. And that is what transpired. And my boss had a human resources person in the room, and that just verifies for all certainty that you're going to be laid off. And so when they finished telling me I was laid off, they said this was effective immediately. And the next thing they asked me to do as a former employee of ESPN was stay and cover the Saints draft, which seemed like an odd way to begin your unemployment. But it seemed like it was my option, and I chose not to. I just didn't feel like it was the right place for me to be, alone in a hotel room and then out in public as a former employee representing ESPN with the New Orleans Saints. So I went home without covering any picks this time from New Orleans. So it's always epic, it seems like, when I go to New Orleans and cover an NFL draft.
Who would? Yeah, exactly. You just didn't expect it to be like this. I think you did make the right call there, and in a sense, Ed, you set the tone for all, and boy, a lot of our good friends. I don't know if the morning news curse, maybe it's the Mosley curse. I think I'm the only one in this room who's actually been laid off by ESPN twice. But no, your tweet, not only did it go viral when you announced it, I think it sort of set the tone for throughout the day, and it was just this weird, and I'm sure you being in the middle of it, it had to be a surreal experience. People like Deadspin and other places that really cover the media they were just coming up with lists, and they would update it all day. And it was once it, at one point it had been, maybe it could be 50, and then it was like 100, and then boy, you even heard more of these numbers, and it started to pour in. And of course, if just to update everybody, in case you're wondering a little bit what we're talking about, ESPN had an enormous amount of layoffs. Ed was included in that. After 17 years, we had no clue that was happening. The day we rolled out the podcast, this would happen. Of course, Ed, I was thinking, I just want you to know that I can be pretty self-centered
to create news and promote this show. Right?
I know. What was that like? You're usually the guy asking the questions in a reporter. Let me ask some of the questions today. What was that just experience of throughout the day? I assume you flew home fairly soon after that, but seeing yourself, you were the lead picture and story at one point on the New York Times website, I believe the Washington Post, and I guess it's a compliment. It's a weird compliment, but it is a compliment. You were sort of the face of the ESPN layoffs, when you're usually the one sort of breaking the news, the breaking news about you. What was that experience like?
Yeah, we always had this saying when we were on assignment in the field at ESPN, and it was always, don't be your own news of the day. Like, don't do something stupid that winds up in you becoming the story instead of the one you're there to cover. And it was a surreal experience, and I guess the fact that my name and my video of doing an interview was, covered by Lester Holt on the NBC Nightly News, and it was the headline in the two publications that you mentioned, it kind of reminded me of something that Michael Irvin told me once. And that was, I was on a flight with him, and he said to me, I'm going to give you a piece of travel advice. And he said, make sure when you get on a plane that you're the biggest celebrity on the plane. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, because if the plane crashes, you want to be the headline. You don't want to be listed and also killed. And so I think he was telling me to get off the flight, for one thing. And the other thing is I guess I succeeded in some odd way in at least being the headline or one of the headliners who got lost to ESPN. So yeah, it's been a totally surreal experience. This is as early as I've brushed my teeth and been out of doors. I haven't known what time it was, what day it is. I would I'd go out to dinner with my wife. I'd have to ask her, what's the weather like? I haven't been out of the house. What meal are we going to eat? I'm not sure. Is it breakfast? Is it dinner? I had no concept of time, space, anything. So one of the things I did was I changed my Twitter handle. And a lot of people have been humored by the fact I changed it from Edwarder ESPN to Edwarder. First it was FA, and then it was RFA.
Which stands for?
Restricted Free Agent.
Yes.
And so it's a football term. And people have been asking on Twitter, why is it? What does this mean? And so I wanted to save that definition for our podcast and for our audience. And so ESPN has told me, and I'm sure all of the others who were let go, that they're going to honor our contracts. At the same time, their expectation is that we are going to honor those contracts. And what I've subsequently found out by having dialogue through a lawyer with the legal department is they are not anticipating allowing you to negotiate your way out of your contract. Say, they're allowing us to go pursue other opportunities if there are some. But if you get a job you want, what I've been told is then you have to, if you want the job, take it knowing you're not going to be paid by ESPN. You're not going to double dip. We're not going to just offset. And so I feel a little like Brett Favre when he left the Packers in this way.
A guy you covered.
I did. I was covering him at this time.
Very closely.
And Favre was most angry about the fact that the Packers, in his mind, took away his team and then denied him the opportunity to go compete wherever he wanted to. And what he wanted to do was compete against them. And so his point was, you think I'm no good, so what do you care where I go? Why can't I just go play for the Minnesota Vikings and we'll see if I'm any good? Well, obviously the Vikings or the Packers, they have their own interests to protect, and I understand that. So that's kind of why I'm a restricted free agent. Apparently, if I want to continue being paid by ESPN for the duration of my contract, then they will not allow me to work in television or other media without risking all that they owe me.
All right. So just to clarify,
except for the podcast, which I had gotten clearance in advance on.
And in retrospect, we kind of joked about this just a little bit, but in retrospect, when you were given permission to do the podcast, that may have been a sign for us, Ed.
That was the next question I asked. I said, does this mean I'm going to get laid off? And the person who I asked that of is also the person who eventually fired me. And they said, I knew you were going to ask that, and they didn't say no or yes. So I thought that indicated the potential doomsday, as we like to say here. I'm not the only one who, in my mind, was unjustly fired. There were an awful lot of really good people let go, and you could staff an entire sports network with them. In fact, I've seen on Twitter that people are suggesting that. Unfortunately, none of these people seem to have any financial backing, and it really causes me, like I said, it's not the quality of your work that's a factor. Well, it causes me to wonder, what is ESPN about? Because, I thought it was about news and information and highlights, and I'm not sure that is the point of emphasis anymore. And how is ESPN going to cover the NFL without all of the people who just lost their jobs? What happens without Merrill Hodge and Ron Jaworski to NFL Matchup? What happens to NFL Insiders without a number of analysts, former general managers like Joe Banner and Mark Dominic? Are we really about to see a time when ESPN can no longer afford to cover its most valuable property in the way that historically it has?
It's very I know it's incredibly tough to go through. I think for a lot of folks that, and unfortunately, it's like living through your own funeral in some sense. I'm sure, Ed, and I've dealt with a little bit of this in the past. You don't really know, and you have a good relationship with people on Twitter, and you'll go back at them if they're negative, and you block them if you have to.
I block them if they use profanity.
There you go.
You've got some name calling.
You've got some rules. You've got some order rules out there.
And you know what? This week I did kind of overlook the profanity rule.
Yeah.
Because the profanity was not being directed at me.
That's right. You're okay. If you use profanity at ESPN right now, I get it. But you're right. It's that's a strange. It's not a whole lot of solace to hear, hey, it didn't have anything to do with my work. Okay, it's nice. Yeah. You didn't get fired because you screwed something up, because that can be one of those things where you sit around questioning yourself. But when you get fired, you don't really have any answers. And I think that leaves, and I'll just say this from a, you and I, at least the way I handle things, I can't help but laugh a little bit, because it seemed like with some of these layoffs, they wanted to get at least another maybe day of work out of them. And then it's like, oh, okay, well now, and then about a day later, Mark Stein announces. And that's when you truly know you and Stein are people that in my mind, and Stein was kind of one of my mentors at the Dallas Morning News. Again, anybody related to the Dallas Morning News is now out there. Jacques, Calvin, I want to say, people that have been great friends over the years and our colleagues, they're out on the street right now. Now, it's an incredibly difficult thing. Now, let me ask you this. What has it, because you've heard from just about everybody, and I don't know, whatever you're comfortable saying in terms of who's reached out to you, but from what I can tell, it's sort of been a who's who list in the NFL, and you have to take some solace, or that has to be encouraging to know that people, think about how huge, they did this during the draft. It's like the ESPN's one of the biggest things, maybe the biggest thing they do on an annual basis.
In the offseason.
Right. They start lopping these people right before. Now, maybe it's like, well, we can do this story.
And then we can
take it and then get the draft and get everybody thinking about that. So that was probably some thought, put into that. But what has that been like hearing from some of these folks?
It really has been like eavesdropping on your own funeral in many regards. I've gotten an incredible number of emails from people who are a part of the NFL team that I worked with every day. And I'm talking about, like, the most touching one of all to me was from a researcher, Doug Clausen, who I've become, very close to and reliant on, and I've really advocated for him. And he wrote just an incredible thing like, I was emotional about it
Yeah.
as I am now. And I finally said to him, look, when I can fairly respond to this in the way it deserves, I will, but I don't know if that will be ever. As far as people I've heard from that surprised me the most, I heard from 3 or 4 head coaches. I heard from multiple general managers. I heard from Hall of Fame players. I heard from current players. And the most surprising of all to me was Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, phoned me. And I was told that he was in a car when he got the word by somebody who was with him, and said he was angered by it. And I haven't spoken to him yet, but that surprised me, and that tells me something about Roger Goodell as a human being. So there are, and I offered in a text message back to him that I would, failing to find future work, that when he goes back to Foxborough next year, I'll go as his body double, because we're similarly colored. And at one point when I was covering a game in New Orleans again, a security person tried to deny me access to the field and then confused me for Roger Goodell and let me pass. So I'm willing to do that for Roger if that's what it comes to. If I don't find other work, I will have a pretty huge demand for my fee, because I'll be risking my life, I think. But yeah, it is. You mentioned funeral, and that is what it's really like. It's like your professional funeral. And in reading these incredible notes from people, I guess I found about 6 people I'd like to speak at my real funeral whenever that may be.
And I hope that we won't that won't be like a podcast from
Well, I know you're so excited about all these detrimental things that have happened to me that have created buzz that you think will benefit this show.
We did.
That I'm worried about what I have to do next week.
That's right. I have not at all embraced this. In fact, I think ESPN, it's surreal thing to watch this happen, and to so many of my good friends, and I hate that it happened to you. And Ed, I mean, for people, sometimes it's just like, you've dealt with a lot. I don't want to get into all this, but I mean, for people that don't know, you've had some close family members that have had some really, really tough medical situations, and you've been a rock for them. And I think hopefully what's going to happen now is, when you need people, and I know how you are, you're going to launch yourself into whatever's next. But listen, you've been the rock to people. I think a lot of your friends are going to be there for you, and I
think they have been.
Yeah, and I think they will be. And hey, times of crisis, you do kind of find out who your buddies are. And the other day, there was, you were getting ready to say goodbye to your pup, and that's that morning, and I think that's one of the things people like about you, in addition to other things. But on Twitter, you sort of share, "Hey, here's my grandson." No, that's okay. But I think people kind of like it, and sort of take pleasure in, hey, we kind of know him a little more.
It's a very human approach, I think.
Exactly. And so you were saying, getting ready to say goodbye to your beloved dog, Austin. And that's on top of everything else, you weren't planning on this other thing happening.
I lost my dog and my job in a span of 24 hours. And I would say the only good thing about what happened to me in New Orleans was that it did allow me to go home. And when we had to euthanize Austin, the last of our golden retrievers, at the age of 11, I was able to be there with my wife, Jill, and, with him. And that was some solace. Like you said, I mean, my daughter's had brain surgery, and the surgeon came out in the middle of the operation and said the computer-guided equipment had failed and they were trying to restart it, but they were suspending the operation. And then at the end of that night, he came out and told us he didn't know if he had gotten what he was looking for in there, and we didn't know till the next day that they confirmed that it was gone. Her husband of only 4 years, got colon cancer, and he died last year or year and a half ago. And so yeah, this doesn't compare in the grand scheme of the adversity our family has confronted, but it's unnerving in its own way, and it's disappointing, and it's a place you don't expect to be. Because quite honestly, I thought I was a good reporter who was doing his best work in the studio when I was in there. It became more natural to me, and I wasn't so scripted, and I could be spontaneous, and it allowed me opportunities to show my personality. And hopefully that'll happen here.
Yeah, I think we'll continue to do that. And I will say, just on a lighter note, when you did say the part, and listen, I've lost my dog Trooper, and I still call my new dachshund Trooper 4 years after Trooper's death. But you said I lost my dog and I lost my job. You need to deliver that line to Kitty Chesney. This sounds like a country song that
on
needs
Twitter,
to be written.
On Twitter, some people have suggested it does sound like. Somebody told me to go make sure I keep an eye on my truck, because that could be next, but I don't have a truck. Anyway, so yeah, some people have thought that, knowing my love of country music, that does sound very lyrical. Sounds like a sad country song. And I did put on Twitter, I did call attention to the potential of this situation being turned into a great country hit, to Kenny Chesney and Cole Swindell and Josh Abbott and Carly Pierce. And, Cole Swindell responded by inviting me out to his show. And I said, let me check my calendar. Yep, I'm available. So.
That's right. Just don't let it interrupt our production schedule with the Doomsday podcast. All right, Ed, thank you so much for sharing.
Well, the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness, it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes.
All right, it is the Doomsday podcast, and we are very pleased. The University, or the Colorado University, I should say, head coach Mike MacIntyre. And one of the great things, Ed Werder, is that Mike and I got to know each other pretty well when he was the secondary coach with the Dallas Cowboys under Bill Parcells. And Mike, I have to say, how cool is that you used to be the secondary coach here, and, it goes full circle, and however many years later, 14, 15 years later, they end up taking one of your cornerbacks.
Whose name we can't pronounce.
But it's Chidobe Awuzie, and we just call him Cheeto. They need to do a Cheetos commercial, somebody does, once he hits it big, so that'd be a good one.
It's a Cheeto and a taco for the Cowboys?
Exactly. A Cheeto and a taco. And he's a phenomenal young man. He graduated in 3.5 years, and started for us for 4 years. And he can play every position back there, and he can play multiple spots on special teams. I mean, he's a guy, like I learned from Bill Parcells. He's a guy you can take to the game, and he can play a lot of plays. He's a special young man.
What was that like, though, having had that past and your NFL background with the Cowboys, and then seeing him go? I mean, was that I would think that makes it even more special that you have that background. And what have you conveyed to him in addition to congratulating him? What have you told him about that he should expect from this area?
Yeah, I've told him quite a few things. We're going to talk some more before he gets out there. And, I told him about, of course, the people there and how, the Joneses were so good to me and my family. I really appreciate them and how their organization is run. And it's one of the best in the world. And it's when you're a Cowboy, it's something special. And he'll represent them well, and he'll play well. And it was when I was thinking that might happen. As I saw the Cowboys coming up, because I know they were intrigued by him a lot, and I kind of saw some other DBs going off, and I said, I think they're going to take him, and sure enough, they did. So I was very, very excited, to say the least.
Mike, we know that in the offseason, the Cowboys lost both their starting corners, Brandon Carr and Mo Claiborne, so obviously it seems he's going to be expected to play a significant number of snaps as a rookie in a division where, there's Odell Beckham Jr. and Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey. Is he going to be up to that right away as a young player?
He is so mentally tough, guys. He is mentally smart and mentally tough. He's physically tough. He'll be ready to mentally. You won't break him down. Physically, he's going to have to get used to playing against those guys each week. And, in the Pac-12, I know it's not the NFL by any stretch, but if you look around the Pac-12, you look at all the NFL players in the Pac-12, especially from receiver and DB area, to me, it's the best receiver DB league there is in the country. And the ball's being thrown, and we played a lot of pro-type coverages. We played a lot of man from my background, and, I'm heavily involved in the secondary. I'm coaching it. I'm working with it. So I feel like he definitely will be prepared. But mentally, if you're worried about him mentally being he'll be mentally ready. He's a mentally tough young man, really mentally tough.
Can he cover for like 8 or 10 seconds per play if this Taco Charlton guy does not create a pass rush?
You can't. You got to cover for 8 or 10 seconds. Dion couldn't even do that. He might tell you he could, but he couldn't.
He would tell you he could. You're right. He would tell you he
but
could.
For 8 or 10 seconds, he would say he could do it, and then he'd be up there yelling at the guys to get to the passer.
Hey, one of the things that I saw when they showed some of his highlights last night on ESPN's coverage of the draft is he looks like a guy who can really blitz effectively as a slot corner. Is that a unique talent he has?
Yeah, he has an exceptional ability to play the run and blitz, especially inside in the nickel area. You know, when y'all see him, I mean, he's built. I mean, he's 202 pounds. He's built really built well. He can play safety, he can play corner, he can play nickel, wherever they feel like they need to have him to play. And he could, he's done all that in a game before for us. He's so bright, and but he is an excellent blitzer, very good against the run in there.
You're talking to Mike MacIntyre, the Colorado head coach, used to be with the Cowboys. His player, who he calls Cheeto, Awuzie, has become second-round pick for the Cowboys. I mean, that's interesting that you talked about him being able to play up in the box. Put your NFL coaching hat back on. Would you see him down the road as a safety? I mean, I know he's got the versatility. Where do you think he ends up? Because obviously the teams have huge needs at safety as well as cornerback.
Right, he could play either one. I think that he could be a playmaker at either spot. But if they're going to go like safety to nickel, or they're going to drop their safety down to cover when teams go four wides, or cover a really good tight end, he would be excellent at that. There's some corners that couldn't do that. And there's some safeties that can't do that and go to corner. So I think he gives them the reason I thought he was one of the best DBs on the board in the whole country. Some had a little bit taller or mild than that. There wasn't one guy out there that could do all the things he can do. He was also our gunner on punt team. He was our gunner and free hit guy on kickoff coverage team. And I could have used him returning kickoff, not punts, but kickoffs, because he did it great in high school. But I didn't want to have him have that many hits. So, I think his ability to adapt and their ability to, when you go to a game in the NFL, you only usually take about 7 DBs. You might have the luxury of taking 8, but usually it's 7. So those guys got to play special teams, and then you got to have guys that can play multiple positions, and he can do that.
To add context to what you just said, which I think was this kid's the most versatile corner in the draft, in your opinion, there were, 19 DBs drafted in the first 2 rounds, which is a record. So that's a pretty remarkable statement.
Right, because I think if you ask a lot of other people that, they would say the same thing. So that could have been a hindrance to him and a positive. When you get him at the positive, it might have been a hindrance in the draft type as well. Is he a corner? Or is he a nickel? Or is he a safety? So that might have hurt him maybe going a little bit earlier. I know that sounds crazy, but when you're sitting in that war room trying to figure it all out. But then when you get him, you go, wow, we get him here. He definitely can play 2 spots, probably 3 spots, as you have injuries and different things that happen during the season. And he's smart enough to handle all that. I mean, he is really bright.
His background, I've read, Mike, that he was, about a 3-star recruit. It wasn't like, maybe everybody in the world was fighting over him. Is this a kid that sort of has always, to a certain extent, used that chip on his shoulder? And it sounds almost like, being the 60th pick, although, hey, there's nothing wrong with being a second-round pick, he might channel some of that into moving forward in the NFL.
It's interesting. I offered him. I was coaching at San Jose State University as the head coach there. His high school team came to our team camp, and it was in pads. It was going between his 9th and 10th grade year. And he was the fly sweep receiver. And then he played safety, and he played corner. And I go, golly, that kid's good. They go, what year is that to the coach? He goes, he's just going to be a 10th grader. So I called Cheeto over. We talked for a while. I said, I really like you. So I watched him the rest of the week. And then at the end of the camp, I said, hey, Cheeto, you got a full scholarship to San Jose State. And so I've known him since he was 15 years old. And just seen him grow up, and just so proud of him. And he's a special. I just think he's a special talent. When y'all meet him and talk to him, you'll go, that's probably one of the sharpest guys I've ever met. To me, I'm not going to try to put this on him, and as far as being a player there, but he's in the same caliber, intelligence, relationship, person, maturity as a Darren Woodson was.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
Wow.
That's the type of person you're getting. That's the type of intelligence you're getting. That's the type of work ethic you're going to get. Now, you just got to go out there and keep fighting and doing it. And all three of our DBs that got drafted, we had one in the second round, one in the third round, and one in the fourth round. All three of them weren't highly recruited, and which doesn't mean anything to me. I've always said, I'm not trying to brag, but there's one thing I think I'm good at. I think I can coach a DB and evaluate a DB. So when we got good ones coming out next year, we're going to keep having them. So when we had good ones from San Jose, they're playing. So it's just an area that I love to be having my hands on, and I still, as a head coach, I like to get in there and get involved with the DBs.
Darren Woodson, a second-round pick who became a Cowboys Ring of Honor member and wears multiple Super Bowl rings and still has a job at ESPN. So,
and he was kind of, Darren coming out. I was very fortunate. I got to coach Darren his last year, and in coming out, he was a linebacker. If y'all remember correctly.
Yeah, rover type player.
Safety.
Yeah.
And so everybody's kind of like, where does he go? What does he do? And he played some nickel and he played some safety. And I don't think he ever played corner. He might have in a few areas early, but that's where I see Cheeto adaptable like that.
I always thought, Mike, that if Roy Williams, the safety that you coached for a little bit here, had Darren be able to stay around a little bit longer, his career might have gone. Roy did fine. He hung around for a good while in the NFL, but it as you recall, it seemed like having Darren back there just made everybody better. And I think Roy suffered a bit from Darren, having to retire because of that back injury.
I heard Mike say he makes everybody better.
No. I think I loved coaching Roy, and we had Roy and Terrence Newman. My first year, we had Roy, Terrence Newman, and Darren Woodson, and all those guys, and that was a great one. And Roy and Terrence in there. The next 3 years that I was there was a lot of fun, and those guys were really, I really thought the world of them.
And Terrence is still playing as a starter in the NFL at 38 or 39.
It's a funny story. Terrence, when he came out. Terrence was a kid that didn't even get a scholarship out of high school. He was really on a track scholarship at first. The way he explained the story to me when he went to Kansas State, then they put him on football scholarship, and then kind of situation. He was more recruited for track in a way, and then they realized he's a good football player and switched to scholarship type thing. And he didn't even start to his redshirt junior year, I believe, in college, and he just kept working. And now look at him, he's playing. He's going to play. I guess he's going to try to play another year.
He is.
And he's just a phenomenal guy. And so that was. I'm excited for the Dallas Cowboys. They got Cheeto, and I'm so excited that Cheeto is at the Dallas Cowboys. And because it's always been my team growing up and everything. And so I'm excited for them.
Well, we can't wait to watch him play. Appreciate you doing this. By the way,
great guest.
Mike, you're always welcome back here. But can I just say this? You did not help me much. I was trying to get you a hefty raise there at Colorado by leading the forces to get you this Baylor job, and you kept saying no, I have no interest. I'm like, Mike, stop saying that.
Have you been to Boulder, Colorado, Matt? Have you been to Boulder, Colorado?
Mike's just too honest
for
his own good.
I worked in Boulder, Colorado. It's a gorgeous place. Nobody wants to leave Boulder for Waco.
I'm not saying he had to leave, Ed. I was trying to get the man more money at Colorado, and he's just too honest.
He knew how good he had it. He knew he had a good deal, and he didn't want somebody else to get his deal. It's a beautiful place, the best campus in the country.
All right.
It is a gorgeous place. Thanks for having me on, guys, and y'all will enjoy Cheeto as a player, and you'll enjoy Cheeto as a person. So
run hard behind Ralphie.
That's right. That's right.
We will.
Continued success. All right, Mike.
Thanks,
really
Mike.
appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Well, we thank Mike MacIntyre, the head coach at Colorado. Just some great stuff as he was talking about, I believe as he calls him, Chidobe Awuzie is the Cowboys' second-round pick. Talk a little bit more about him. But, Ed, I think it's very appropriate that we talk about taco. They've got Cheeto and they have taco. As of today, I went to my favorite taco place, Resident Taqueria over in Lake Highlands, and of course they had come up with a special taco this weekend honoring Taco Charlton, Cowboys pick at number 28 overall, and it had pork, short rib, cilantro, corn, charro beans, onion. Very nice.
No Wolverine? Left out the Wolverine? I think that leaves an opening for some other people in the area who might be experts at making tacos and running Tex-Mex establishments, like my good friend Gabriel De Leon at Medea from scratch.
Lots of mentions here. Goodness
Has
gracious.
about to open his third location in Flower Mound.
Maybe they could accuse us of trying to get free meals, but I've certainly, guys like us.
I thought we
never-
were trying to inspire competition among the great taco chefs in town.
Yeah, and there's also, by the way, the Taco Joint is another place. That,
That I Chewy's, my
frequent.
wife and daughter love both. Those
Okay,
places.
all right.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of those mentions.
Okay, let's talk football.
Taco Charlton. Okay, here's why I'll applaud the Cowboys. At least, Trader Jerry, boy, loves to come rolling up that board or move out. Let's stack some picks. Let's move out of that first round. Sometimes it's okay to stay right there and let a good player come to you. And so they were patient as they saw some folks like Tack McKinley out of UCLA, who I love that. He's like my favorite player now. He carries that
Picture of his grandmother.
the picture of his grandmother everywhere. And he got on the plane to – who ended up taking him?
Atlanta traded up in front of Dallas to make sure they got him.
Atlanta trades up to get him, and he's getting on the plane, and he's still got that grandmother's photo that he's taking around. Love that kid. But Cowboys end up with Taco Charlton, and Ed, you and I have both been checking in with a lot of our sources across the league to sort of get their reaction. What was your general reaction when you saw them take Taco Charlton?
Well, as much as the Cowboys, I think, have recently done an outstanding job in terms of selecting players in the draft based on their board and not need. This was clearly a need draft. They lost, almost their entire secondary, and they obviously have been desperate to find a pass rusher. And so Taco Charlton and TJ Watt are both on the board when their pick comes up at 28. And, Taco Charlton, according to the people I've talked to, they don't really see an explosive, quick twitch type of pass rusher. They see him as a very good 4-3 end and really on the left side. And usually your best rusher obviously comes off the right side, the blind side of the quarterback, and has to beat the best offensive lineman, the left tackle. People I've talked to think he can play the run from the edge. He has some pass rush, but like I said, not a true twitchy, explosive type, but he has some length and some feel to work the edge. I guess they chose him over Watt because they saw Watt as a lighter weight player, more of a 3-4 outside linebacker, which like DeMarcus Ware is. And I guess my only concern is they didn't have a first-round grade on this player that they did take in the late first round. Now, that worked out when they took Travis Frederick. But it doesn't always. And, we've seen drafts in the past, Matt, where the Cowboys have been desperate for a pass rusher and took him in the first round, like Ebenezer Ekubon and, Kavika Pittman and Shante Carver and Anthony Spencer. And, I think we have to hope, if you're a Cowboys fan, you have to hope that this guy in his production over time surpasses those players.
In defense of Spencer, and I do remember when they ended up doing that 1-year deal where he got a lot of money for 1 year and played like one game, I would not quite put him in that grouping. I don't think that's quite fair to him because I actually think he was sort of a borderline Pro Bowl player at one point. The rest of those guys, you're right, just there's a lot of bust involved in that.
So he is what he is. I don't think he's going to be an elite pass rusher. And, the other two picks, as we know, are corners. And obviously there's a relationship between the ability of the defensive front to create pressure and allow the players in the secondary to have success and create turnovers that the Cowboys simply have not gotten out of those positions.
No, they haven't. And while they've been knocking on the door in 2 of the last 3 years, Ed, that has been a huge factor in Aaron Rodgers doing in one time when he was compromised physically. We'll always remember that when they just simply could not get pressure on him. And in that game, if they had been able to do that, then you're finally getting Romo through to an NFC title game.
And here's the reason, I think, a couple different facts, I think, that point out the stress they're under at that position. They've had a different player lead the team in sacks for 5 consecutive seasons. They generated pressure on just 23% of their opponents' passing downs last year. That's a third worst in the NFL. Only the Lions and the Colts had worse percentages. So that's an area that where, understandably, there's great concern. I'm just not sure how successful they've been in creating a better situation up front this year.
All right, I want to tell you, I love when you bring some of those numbers here. Is this from your researcher, or is he still allowed to do things for you?
Why do we have to talk about what he's allowed to do? Let's just be grateful that we have these facts, and I'd rather not say where they came from.
Okay, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. Now, this is from one of the top scouts in the NFL. And I love the scouting community. You know that about me. Going back to C.O. Bricado from Gil Brandt, all those old guys. We lost C.O. in the last year or two, and that was really sad. But I love scouts, and I like kind of tapping into some of the things that come from them. Here's what a scout texted me about Taco Charlton. Has a very good size, lengthy player, run defendability. That goes along with what you were saying, Ed. Some pass rush upside, not exactly an explosive rusher, but has some feel and knack.
Feel and knack?
Yes, has some feel and knack. Probably left end in a 4-3.
So there you go.
Between us. Oh, that's the part where he told me to.
That's the part where you weren't supposed to use it?
That's right. That's okay. So lines up over.
You really shouldn't say between us for last. Like I think you're. I think you.
That.
Yeah, if you don't lead with it, if you're not forewarned, then you can dismiss it like you did, casually just ignore it.
I think between us means, in my mind, you can share the info. Just don't. Yeah.
Oh, is that what that means?
I'm
curious to get your definition of off the record.
That's right.
We'll
have some journalism discussions as we move forward here. But so let's move on to the second round pick. Taco Charlton, I think, is a second round grade. In the Cowboys, leave it to them. In the past, I thought they would sometimes play fast and loose with sort of like a lot of teams say, we had a first round grade and on a third round pick. You have to hand it to them for being honest.
Well,
about
I think
this
that's
guy.
because sometimes Jerry in the past has been careless with being photographed in front of the board, and ultimately they don't want him contradicted and his honesty compromised. So I think that's what this was sort of damage control.
Yeah. I think his honesty was compromised a long time ago. So, in the second round pick, we just talked to Mike MacIntyre earlier, the coach at Colorado, who coached Chidobe. He said it differently than I've heard it, but I would think he knows since he coached him, Awuzie. And now, here's what I like about him in addition to, and I know you've talked to some folks, I'll just say and I'm not someone who holds up with a bunch of tape. I'm never going to come on here and try to play the whole scout deal. I'll tell you what other people say. But in what I have seen, the excitement I would have over this player is that he sort of loves to get in that slot, blitz off the slot, even at 200 pounds. He's not a huge guy, but will get physical, will make tackles, and it just kind of is in the middle of everything. And I even think he ended up with something like 26 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's for a cornerback, Ed. I guess in some sense he's a little bit like Jabril Peppers from Michigan in the sense that he can do a whole bunch of things and can play different positions. No, doesn't play on. I could. He said, Mike, I think, told us that when he first saw him, he was playing jet sweep.
Jet sweep. He was a jet sweep guy.
Yeah.
That was in his 10th grade.
That was in 10th grade. He's since he was going into the 10th grade at that point. This is a guy who likes to get up there near the line of scrimmage, and I think it'll be kind of fun to watch.
Which Orlando Scandrick
like
has always been good at too, right? I mean, a smaller player, but Orlando Scandrick had a great knack for blitzing off the slot. And if you look at the highlights of Cheeto, as I'm going to call him for a while, you see a lot of those same abilities in a bigger player. The people I've talked to in the league describe him as a guy who has size, speed, press coverage ability. Notes that the Cowboys lost Brandon Carr, and he's sort of the same model in terms of he's a borderline 6-foot guy, 200 pounds, as Coach Mack said, with 4.4 speed, and does have some ability to cover man-to-man. Is he going to be a guy who I think the question is on him, from what I've heard and seen, is he doesn't have a great ability to track the ball. He doesn't locate the ball well a lot of times, and so you have to wonder if he's going to have some of these big receivers in the NFC East who are going to be able to post him up or just outcompete him at the point, of the ball to make the play, and that he's not going to be a guy who creates a lot of interceptions.
I think that makes him a great fit here. If he doesn't,
a guy who can't track the ball.
Well, yes,
it's best not to know. I don't need to know where that ball is. Let's hope it's on the other side.
I think he'll eventually be a safety. Here is sort of where this thing is headed. Now, let's get to this third round pick. So another corner. You got a Taco, you got a Cheeto, and then you had the third round pick. Of course, this was on Friday evening, number 92nd overall, Jordan Lewis, quarterback out of Michigan. It is always amazing, Ed. You see it. Alabama will have an unbelievable amount of players taken. And then at some point there'll be a run. It's Harbaugh, what he's done in a relatively short time at Michigan is, Ohio State's always. But it's like he shows up, and then they're just flooding into the NFL. And part of that, and we'll talk about this Jordan Lewis, part of that, I think that people are fascinated with some of his players. Not only are they productive, but he's got such that NFL background that his what he likes to do with his defensive backs are just a little more creative than most college defenses that you will see. And so when you draft a Michigan player like Jordan Lewis, he may have done more things, maybe been more versatile, and these are two players, Cheeto and Jordan Lewis from Michigan. They need to step in and play immediately. I mean, you heard the reports. Jerry shot it down, but there were reports, and I've heard it from more than one person last night saying the Cowboys were looking to move Orlando Scandrick.
Now we're back to Jerry's credibility and honesty thing all over again.
Jerry said that's erroneous.
Well, if it's true, I would say that the reason it's true is because Lewis is a guy who NFL people see as a slot corner, whereas the Cheeto is an outside corner. This kid, obviously, there's going to be some concern because he hasn't resolved an allegation made against him of domestic violence. That's still pending, so that's a potential issue off the field that could affect his availability, at least in training camp and going forward, depending on how that's resolved. He obviously has said he is not guilty and thinks he will it'll be adjudicated in his favor and he'll be found not guilty. But as a player, he best projects to be an inside slot corner or a nickel corner type of guy. And so that's what I think would have made Orlando Scandrick expendable. And perhaps the Cowboys, seeing now that they have two of the same kind of player and you really don't want more than one of those, they were trying to get a pick to acquire another defensive player in the third round.
I think that is all correct. And one thing, though, I like about him now, his size is what held him back a little bit, as well as the allegation. There's some thought that he might have been late first round, at least second round, but fell because of the allegation.
Cowboys had him on the board as a second round pick, according to their grade.
Yes, and what I will tell you, and one of the big issues with this team has been just the inability to get takeaways, and to be more specific, even with interceptions. And while they've had some decent defensive backs, they just really do not get interceptions.
And so you wonder how well. And so they have two problems, right? We already described the one, the failure to consistently create pressure. They're third worst team in the NFL at that. And that creates an obvious consequence on the back end for these guys. And we mentioned it with Coach Mack, who said, hey, even Dion couldn't cover for 8 or 10 seconds, although he might tell you he could. You know, the other, I think, interesting statistic here that sort of underscores the situation in the secondary is that the Cowboys allowed opponents to complete 67% of their passes last season. That's the second highest in the NFL to the Lions. And the Lions were one of the few teams that also had a worse pass rush than the Cowboys. So there's the symmetry of the two, that the equation usually involves both of those things. But, you know, it's a chicken and the egg. Which comes first, the pass rush and then the good coverage and the takeaways? Or does good coverage create pass rush opportunities? I tend to think you got to be able to protect your corners. You got to be able to create a pass rush and give them opportunities with the quarterback under duress and not maybe throwing when he wants to throw it or not located in the pocket where he wants to be, to get the kind of turnovers the Cowboys need to be more competitive on defense.
The Cowboys continue to stack left defensive ends, and so they at some point, maybe you'd want somebody coming over there from the blind side. Would be a nice thing. Now, what I was going to bring up about Jordan Lewis, and I believe he ended up with about 6 interceptions. I watched him this year. There was a game against Wisconsin. Wisconsin driving down 14-7 against Michigan, and this kid had as gorgeous an interception as you will ever see at a big moment. Wisconsin, not a team known for throwing downfield, was needing to throw downfield. Receiver streaking down there. Jordan Lewis not only makes a play on the ball, goes up with the proper hand. Boy, I used to watch Parcells. You know, he just kill him that people would use their wrong hand. I remember him working with Terrence Newman on it. He goes up with the proper hand and not only, you know, gets his hand on the ball, just swipes the ball. Just 1 point. So I think the thing that held him back, again, the allegation, for his size, he doesn't have the speed. Generally, if you're going to take a 5'10", 5'11" corner, you really want that person to have tremendous speed. And while it sounds great to guys like us, 4.55, that sounds fine. There are players out there, much like John Ross out of Washington, the wide receiver, who ran something insane.
4.22 or something.
Yeah. So, and Ed, what I want to do, I want to acknowledge to everybody, we are. It's the third day of the draft as we are recording this. We do know that Ryan Switzer has been taken by the Cowboys. Well, you know, the rest of the draft, when you get back, you're going to be leaving town for a little bit. Hopefully, man, you'll take some. You need some rest. You need to clear your mind a little bit, decompress.
Got some job interviews.
I don't know if you should share that, but I think you'll come back refreshed. And what we'll do is dig in on day 3. And a lot of folks, hey, because what you see. A lot of times, you've seen it here with Anthony Brown, you know, some of these players that end up coming in here 5th, 6th, 7th round, a lot of times, somebody did that the other day. They had looked up in the last 3 Super Bowls to look at the starting cornerbacks, and it was crazy. Of the starting cornerbacks, 2 of them were undrafted. There was a couple of 5th round picks. I mean, it was remarkable.
Well, we talked a little bit, Matt, as we close, about the Cowboys, you know, being in a position on defense where these young players that they took are going to be expected to start or play significant snaps immediately. And that's a lot to ask. We saw the Atlanta Falcons do it, though, last year. They went to the Super Bowl even though they started 4 rookies on defense. And I would say what they're asking these guys to do on defense is more practical than to have expected what they got out of Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott as rookies last year in a pretty successful season.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And it's been a difficult few days for you. Appreciate you doing this, it being so upfront about kind of what you've been going through, and I know people appreciate it and continue to reach out to you. I want to thank Ronnie Foss, good buddy of mine, who has he's the theme song, which is fitting for this week. I'm sorry, baby. That's just the way it goes.
Was that written just for me?
I think so.
I don't like that he calls me baby.
Well, come on. There's worse things. Built to Break. That's the album that comes from. Thanks to Sugaroo Music, New West Records, and Normal Town Records for making that song available to us. Remember, find us Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, anywhere podcasts are found, and then leave us a review. Go on there, hey, positive, negative, whatever. Leave us a review on there, and we really appreciate you being a part.
Did you give them the email address?
The Doomsday Podcast. No, go ahead.
No, I don't know what it is. doomsdaypodcast@gmail.com.
Keith, what the hell is it?
I only missed the.
The Doomsday Podcast@gmail.com.
And that was our producer, Keith, who may or may not have heard. I'm sure that will not get a reference to
I
Doomsday.
know. Keith Reynolds, thank you. All right, good night, everybody.
Well, the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness, it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes. Once you